Generosity is essential for Australia as a society to move forward. And a lot of you here today are representing institutions which are born in impact, trying to create impact in your own way, and lead, and you're trying to navigate those difficult waters. From Stanton Dial, we see organisations trying to rethink and build their businesses as tools of mission and purpose in the community. We think about how teams are reshaping culture and designing themselves for a lasting change. But most importantly, I think all of us are here today because we want to see lives transformed. And how can we do more with what we have? You might be a principal, dreaming about how to activate your school's resources for the next chapter of its history to bring about vision and purpose. You might be a business manager, a CFO, or a property specialist, trying to do what the principal asks you to do, but also balance next year's budget or even just next project. You might be a church leader with an asset or consideration about how to move forward. You're managing new ways for your congregation to flourish. You might be a charity or a service leader, reimagining what your service and purpose is in today's context. Your donor base is surviving at the moment, but you want to see it thrive. Or you might be a fundraiser working for any of those institutions, facing complex challenges, a crowded marketplace, high expectations, and somehow fewer hands. What to do? Well, that's why Stanton Dial and Dunham & Co joined forces here today. We want to help engage with those questions and see if we can work our pathway forward. We want to listen, walk, because while there are headwinds, there's also hope. The bond today is we need to rethink what it means in Australian generosity and how can we inspire it again. And that's why I'm excited to introduce the next voice we'll hear, Mr. Rick Dunham. For over 40 years, Rick has been at the forefront of fundraising strategy, both in Australia and in America. Having started his organisation in 2002, it was only a few short years in 2006 when he officially opened his company here in Australia. But I've heard just today, it's 20 years ago to the date, Rick, is that right? 20 years ago to the date today when he first made his trip to Australia. So he's been around and aware of the Australian context for a long time. Now a global leader in charities, you'll hear a bit more about what he's doing shortly. He's helping charities around the world think through philanthropy and how to inspire donors to give more for the purpose that we can see in the world. So friends, I hope the time we're going to spend together is going to be helpful and fruitful for your purpose and your organisations. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Rick and thank you again for partnering with us.
Thank you, David and Shane, for the partnership. Moreland College, beautiful, beautiful facility with obviously some very good architects. So, see some friendly faces, which is nice. I'm humbled to be here, to be honest. I just am grateful for the chance to have this little bit of time together. And I'm really hoping that what we have to talk about together will be helpful to you in whatever you're thinking about. As I jump into this, let me talk a little bit just about my background. So, as David mentioned, Dunham & Company started in 2002 in the US. I had served in another consulting group prior to that, and for 11 years prior to that had worked inside a nonprofit, so kind of the world you live in. Last 5 years of which was at a university in California as a head of advancement. So understand the dynamics of working inside an institution like that. Dunham & Company today, we're 60 some odd employees, headquartered in Dallas, working actively here in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, and doing a little bit of work in Poland right now, which is some of the most fascinating work I think I've ever done. Two moments in the history of the company that were pretty important that has really informed who we are. One is in 2010, we were invited to join the Giving Institute, which is the kind of the leading body in America of fundraising counsel. And to this day, full transparency, I have no clue why they invited us, but I was happy to accept. They have the Giving USA Foundation, which publishes the Giving USA report, which is the longest running report in America on philanthropic trends, started in 1955. I was asked to join the board of the foundation, ended up chairing that, and from that, ended up, when I finished my term, was asked by the incoming chair to work on global philanthropy. What does it look like for us as an institute to really be involved in global philanthropy? So today I'm now chairing the Giving Institute Global Philanthropy Committee, and which is one of the reasons why we're doing the work we are in Poland. All that to say is, what I want you to hear today is not American. So when I first came to Australia and started working, I remember the conversation, well, you're American, we're Australian, you do what you do, we do what we do, and it kind of doesn't all work together. What I'm sharing with you is not American. What I'm sharing with you are underlying principles that, regardless of the culture, work. And yeah, they have cultural nuance, and you need to be aware of that cultural nuance, but they're underlying principles that are foundational to effective fundraising. And there's a lot more we could talk about today, but we're really going to focus on major gift development and capital campaigns. So first of all, 5 underlying principles that I kind of want to unpack for you, then a really brief section on kind of a framework of execution, and then I want to end with the 5 big mistakes typically we see made in capital campaigns. So, principle number 1 is that fundraising is not begging. From the very earliest days of my career up until even this year, there's so many leaders that I will meet that are so uncomfortable with fundraising. And a lot of times, a lot of times it's born out of this idea that it feels like I'm begging for money. And it just doesn't feel right. And I have to tell you this story. So when I was at the university, I had worked for the first 18 months to develop a major gift program that we titled the President's Circle. It was inviting people into a deeper relationship with the President. President's Circle, super excited about it. We had worked hard for 18 months, and we were finally pulling together our first event. And I remember standing in the back of the room it was one of those moments we've kind of all had where I can't believe this is actually happening. And so, everybody's getting seated, and the president stands up, does an introduction, and he goes, oh, by the way, I finally figured out what the president of a university is. I'm thinking, okay. It's a man who lives in a big house and begs. I thought, I can't believe I'm hearing this. Because we had worked so hard to, what did he just tell people? I mean, it was literally, and this is the point, begging is about me. The reason why people feel uncomfortable is they believe that the fundraising they're doing is about them, and it's not. What is fundraising? It's about the conviction of leadership that the mission really matters. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the mission. And if there's one point I could drive home, it's this. This is why people feel uncomfortable with fundraising, because the focus of their fundraising is misapplied. It's all about the mission. And we're going to make this point over and over again ad nauseum, because it's so important. So fundraising isn't about begging. It's about a conviction of leadership that the mission really matters. Therefore, I'm willing to step in and challenge people, invite people to support this cause. That's principle number 1. Number 2, fundraising isn't about you and your organization. Often this is, you see this indication when we hear language or you read language like "we need" or "our program." It's not about you. It's not about your organization. In fact, we do this thing. Anybody here familiar with David Letterman? That name? Yeah. He used to do his top 10 things, so I kind of channel my David Letterman. We do our top 10 fundraising mistakes. And number 6 on the list is thinking that donors care about your organization, because they don't. What they care about is what you make possible. So it's not about "we need" language. Fundraising isn't about you and your organization. What is it about? It's about the outcomes that donors make possible. And the change in language isn't well, this is our program that has produced this, to, because of your support, this program has now done this. Very different than about me and how great we are, to about you and what you make possible. Yeah, I have one more comment, but I think I'm going to save it. Number 3, fundraising isn't about the transaction. It's super easy, especially when you get down in the weeds of data, looking at donor records and doing all that kind of stuff, is to lose sight of the human behind the donation. And this becomes super important because it's really about a deeply human relational act. What's interesting is there's a couple passages in the Bible that are pretty interesting to me because they make this point. One is found in Exodus 25 when Moses is up on Mount Sinai and God's about to give him a bunch of commands. And the very first command he gives him in verse 1 of chapter 25 is, I need you to do a fundraiser. In fact, the verbiage there is God commanded him to take up an offering for the building of the tabernacle from everyone whose heart moved them to give. So even back then, it was all about the heart. Then you fast forward to 2 Corinthians chapter 9, the Apostle Paul's taking an offering for the needy in Jerusalem. And his statement to them, he was kind of putting a bit of a guilt trip on them for not fulfilling a pledge. And he says, but everyone needs to give what they've decided in their heart to give because God loves a cheerful giver. It's all about the heart. I could go on and on about this, but it's a deeply human relational act that comes from the heart. And we're going to see why that's important in just a moment in terms of your cultivation strategy. If you want to get technical on this, it actually, when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, the top 3 needs is what you help fulfill in fundraising through support. That sense of belonging, connection, and you see that in donor community, you see that in relationship to the organization, to the people within the organization. The next is that sense of self-esteem, achievement, the fact that we're giving you, I as a donor am actually helping to achieve something. It's just not putting money into some black hole that you decide what to do with, and this is why I go back to it's not about your organization, it really is about the donor. And finally, that whole idea of self-actualization, problem solving. It's really interesting, at the end of the day, when you boil it all down, fundraising at its core is about solving problems. It really is. What you're putting in front of donors are problems that only with their help can you solve. So at a very deep level, this is why you got to stay away from the transactional and make sure it stays close to the relational. Number 4, fundraising isn't about exclusivity. And what I mean by that, and this can veer towards capital campaigns in particular, where you're focused on the high net worth individual who can give the most money, et cetera. But in reality, the best fundraising program is understanding that every donor has a role. They all have different capacity. The challenge and the job of great fundraisers is to match capacity and capability with opportunity. Every donor has a role, and every donor needs to appreciate it in that same way. And then number 5, fundraising is not about what you make possible. I'm kind of reinforcing what we talked about just a moment ago. It's about what the donor makes possible. I'm going to use a really stupid illustration, but I think it makes a point. Has anybody seen F1, the movie, yet? Oh, yeah. If you haven't, you got to see it. Imagine having the best Formula One car in the world on the track, ready to go, and the race is about to start and everything, but you're just sitting there and the engine's not running, and people go, well, what's going on? Why aren't you going? We don't have any fuel. You don't have any fuel? You got the best car in the race and you say you don't have fuel? No, but we spend all the money on the car. Donors are the fuel to your programs. You can have the best program in the world. If it's underfunded, guess what? It ain't gonna work. This is why the donor, and I use this word carefully because I don't want to overstate it, but in many ways, the donor truly is the hero because they're the ones that are stepping in and giving you the resource to actually fulfill the vision and to have that program be effective. They work tandemly, I understand that, but without that, you're stuck. I mean, and a lot of you feel that. There's opportunity sitting in front of you and you're trying to figure out how in the world do I get this funded? So this is why it's so important to talk about what the donor makes possible and not again about our programs, that our programs do this, our programs do that. No, because of your support, this is the outcome that's been we've been able to achieve. So let me just summarize real quickly. Lead with vision, not need. If one thing you could do is just organizations don't have needs, they have vision. The vision creates a need, but it's a result of the vision, not the organization. I'm hoping that makes sense. So lead with vision, not need. Steer clear of organizationally centric language and stay donor focused. Just before I got on the plane to come down to Australia, I had a long meeting with one of our writers and one of our lead strategists about this whole thing, because I'd been looking at some copy that had been written. And if you read the copy, it looked like we didn't even know this donor supported the organization. It's like we were asking for the first time. So we had this long conversation, how can we dial this language in so that a donor who reads this understands it? And I go, I don't actually think it's that hard. What if we just talked about because of your ongoing support? That's not, I mean, pretty simple. But we didn't have that kind of language in this letter. Because of your continued support. My point in this is that staying donor focused forces you to think through how do I connect the donor to this outcome most effectively and help them feel the role that they're playing is so important. Ask for relationship, non-transaction, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but kind of as a teaser, the job of great fundraisers is to understand, especially major gift development and campaigns, capital campaigns, is to understand the heartbeat of the donor and to match that passion with an outcome you can help make possible. That's the job, and that can't happen without relationship. It's impossible. Demonstrate how the donor support is achieving impact, so make sure that we're reporting back. It's one thing to ask and give the vision for what their support will do, but how well are you actually communicating it? Guess what? Because you gave, this outcome has now happened, and it's very significant. Understand that the donor is the hero. They're the ones that are fueling the ability to do mission. And finally, always have, and I use this very carefully, have a protocol of gratitude for when a donor gives. And that's super important. It's not just a happenstance and a hit and miss, but you've actually sat down and thought through, what's our protocol? When a donor gives, how do we actually treat them? And is it a one-time thing? Is it a multiple thing? And we're gonna, again, talk about this in just a moment, but literally the highest priority of fundraising is donor retention. It isn't donor acquisition, it's donor retention. We have a data set of about 2.3 million donors and about 30 some odd million transactions that we do modeling in. So we had our data science folks go in and I was asking the question, can we prove statistically and in our data that for every year that a donor stays giving, that they give more money? So they went and did the model, and guess what? It is absolutely true. Over a 5-year period, we looked at it by acquisition source, so where those donors came from, and there was 5 different acquisition sources. The least amount of a dollar gained per donor was 22% over the 5 years, maximum 49%. And it literally went up every year. So donor retention becomes everything. You've worked hard to build this relationship, to get this donor to get engaged, to actually begin to give you money. How do you now retain that relationship? And we'll talk about that in a second. So, second thing is I want to talk about, of the three things, is managing donor relationships. And this is going to be, again, this is a very simple framework. And we can, if we want to dive in deeper at some later point, we can. But this is it's a pretty simple construct, but it's a really important construct to understand. Obviously, the first job is to identify potential donors. Or if you're in a capital campaign, or even if you're trying to grow your major donor program, current donors that have the potential to engage at a deeper level. So that whole identification, so what are you doing to help identify these relationships that are worth the time and energy to continue to grow? Second is cultivation, so cultivate. What does that mean? This is meaning really genuinely building a relationship with this donor so that you understand their passions, like we talked about earlier. You understand where their heart beats. What is it about your organization that makes them get really excited? Why is it that they support you? So, and I failed to say this earlier, but I'll say it now because it's super important. Donors never support the what. They always support the why. So if there's a simple thing to think about, when you look at your appeal, is it really speaking to the why, or is it speaking to the what? And this is part of the cultivation process. Why in the world is this donor really engaged? And what can I learn about them where I can create what I talked about earlier, that match between the opportunities that we represent and where their heart is? And that brings us to solicitation. Solicitation actually is one of the easier things to do if you've done the other two right. Because all you're doing is putting in front of a donor something you've now learned that makes them very passionate and very excited. And this is now an opportunity to fulfill something that's very important to them. So this is, I think a lot of times we get really nervous about solicitation because we haven't done the hard work of the first two steps. And so we're going in shooting a little blind, and as a result, we can often miss the target. I had worked, this is such a great story, so this is at the university. I had worked really hard to get to know this one donor. He was just the most genuine person you would ever meet. Uber wealthy, but you would never know it. Just super approachable, very kind. And I was in my first year of doing my work, and we needed an investment. We actually needed about $500,000, and no, we needed $250,000. And I thought to myself, I know he has a capacity to do that, but I'm going to ask for $100,000. So we went to lunch, had this great lunch together. His name was Elmer Bradley, and I said, Elmer. And I laid out the whole thing, because I knew this is what he was really super passionate about. I said, this is the whole thing we got here. This is the need. Would you be willing to make a $100,000 commitment to this? And it was a pretty easy ask, because I knew this is something that he really cared about. He goes, no. And I literally froze. I honestly didn't know how to respond. Then he broke out laughing and said, no, I want to give $250,000. So the point was, and what I learned is that when I did the hard work of really matching the opportunity with his passion, the solicitation became a whole lot easier. So that's why these steps are so important in sequence. Then finally, the stewardship part. Unfortunately, this is probably where most organizations fall over. I'm going to go back to what we talked about in terms of retention. The single highest priority is retaining a donor relationship. If I don't steward that relationship well, I will lose them. David and I were actually talking about this. One organization had a big campaign, successful campaign, finished it, did not steward those relationships well. About 5 years on, they needed to do another campaign, and none of those relationships existed anymore. Complete and utter train wreck. Malfeasance in my mind from a fundraising point of view. By contrast, I'm working with an organization in the States that last year completed a $30 million capital campaign, their most successful campaign ever. And the head of development approached me at the end of last year and said, we're working on a new $30 million campaign. And I looked at him and he goes, because we need to keep these donors engaged. They didn't drain their pockets to support this first campaign. And they've got, we need to give them more opportunity to invest, not just to invest, but to expand the vision of the organization. So they've put this pretty impressive vision together for how to expand in media. And they're now in the silent phase of another $30 million campaign. And already, he was telling me a couple of weeks ago, the response they're getting is fabulous. Why? They stewarded those relationships so well coming out of that last campaign that those donors understood the impact that they personally made as a result of that investment. So that's really, when we talk about stewardship, it's closing that loop between the donation and impact, and making sure that that donor knows, because they made that contribution, it's not even going back to them one time to say, hey, look what happened, but it's ongoing reporting, demonstrating that what you gave is really truly making a difference. Okay? So that's kind of the protocol we use and recommend in terms of donor relationship management. Now, every organization here, you're different sizes. Some will have a handful of donors at this level, some will have a couple hundred, some will have 500 or 600. The purpose of this is what I would call the division of labor. So when you go into a campaign construct, or when you go in to develop a major gift program, the question is, how are you managing those relationships? And if you'll see the executive founder and the red, the 25 to 50, the reason that's there, the founder, lead executive person of the organization never gets a pass. Sorry, you never get a pass. If whatever those top relationships are, they're your responsibility. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have help along the way of your staff working with you, but those key relationships, you need to feel the personal responsibility that they are cultivated and developed over time. This is not something you outsource to a team. Then the rest of that, depending on, again, how those relationships are considered, are split out in a division of labor, depending on what the goal is. The biggest and most important part of this particular thing, and the reason why I wanted to bring it up, is that leadership is everything when it comes to major gift development and capital campaigns. It's everything. And we're going to talk about the top 5 mistakes in capital campaigns, and you're going to see leadership is everything. And I go back to the first slide, that fundraising isn't about begging, it's a conviction of leadership that the mission really matters. And I'm willing to put myself out there because of it. So, finally, the 5 top capital campaign mistakes. Number 1, skipping the silent phase. And these are all things we've kind of observed for capital campaigns that have failed. Silent phase. This is where you've identified what's getting funded, you've put the case for support together, everything is kind of in wet cement, it's in draft form, you've put the chart of standards together, the kind of levels of gifts you're looking for, and you begin to sit down with your top stakeholders to put in front of them this vision, the case for support, and to get their reaction both to that vision and case for support, and also to what degree might they be involved. Because what you're trying to assess here is our vision something that resonates? Do I have a case for support that effectively articulates that? And thirdly, can I actually get buy-in from my most important stakeholders? Because if you don't have that, I'm sorry, in a capital campaign, you will fail. Just will. So this phase is actually the most important because it helps you set the cornerstone for the campaign properly so that you maximize the potential for success. Second mistake is weak or unclear campaign messaging, and this kind of goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about before. The weakest language I've seen is all organizationally centric, and it talks about how we can be greater because of you, as opposed to what you can do, what your investment will do will make such a change. So This is part of the campaign, the capital campaign case for support, of making sure that there's clarity around that vision, what the donor is actually going to make possible in terms of outcomes. And if this is not really carefully thought through, it's the old, if there's, I won't say the statement because I forget it, but it's something to the effect of there's a miss in the pulpit, there's going to be a fog in the pew. In other words, if I don't understand it, they're not going to understand it. So having clear campaign messaging becomes really critical. Thirdly, expecting every donor to participate because they're not. And this, what I learned early on is that often a no is not a no. Sometimes it is, but often a no is not yet, not at that amount, or I'm just not sure yet. So what I've learned is that when I hear a no, is to circle back around at some point and investigate that a bit more deeply to understand really what is comprising that no. But at the end of the day, there will be some donors where what's being put forward that's not where their heart is, or they just don't have the ability in this moment to give, and that's fine. So what do? You love on them, and you thank him, and you build that relationship, because there will be a moment where that no will become a yes if you steward that relationship well. But don't be disappointed because every donor doesn't participate. Casting vision without also asking. We were conducting a $130 million capital campaign for an organization, and the leadership was very excited about getting up and casting vision, absolutely refused to ask. And you can guess what happened. The whole thing just stalled. I mean, we had some momentum, we got the early wins, but you could just see it went and just stalled. What I'm excited to say is that the head of the campaign internally decided her time was up, sat down with leadership, and said, I think my time is up here. The campaign was still going, but it was kind of puttering along. And the leadership the leader at that time looked at her and said, yeah, I think it's my time to step up. And it was like, yes, if I have to leave for you to do that, yes. So casting vision without asking means that you don't bear the conviction of the mission, where we started. If you're unwilling to ask, that means you really don't have the conviction of the mission. If you do have that conviction, you don't care what people think about you, because at the end of the day, seeing that vision fulfilled is everything. Finally, lack of leadership involvement, which goes beyond just the asking, but leadership, especially in a capital campaign, is absolutely everything. If at the very top the leader believes it's optional, you will fail. If the leader believes it's not an option, and this is absolutely must succeed, and is putting energy into that, guess what? Your chances for success just went up dramatically. Because everything flows from that leadership. And we've seen this over and over again, where leadership. One more story out of the university. So I was there 5.5 years. Once we got the program up and running and we were kind of okay, we began the work on a $65 million capital campaign. And brought in consulting, did all the due diligence, we built the case for support, literally had every duck lined up. We had actually worked with the board. The board had stepped up and gave beyond what any of us thought they would give. I mean, it was stunning. So we had gone through the silent phase and we were kind of ready to do this public launch. The president called me in his office and said, we're not going to do the capital campaign. And I'm thinking to myself, you're literally talking about 4 years of work, board that's approved, and as a leader, you can't really step up and do this. And it was pure fear on his part. I within 6 months I was gone. Because I knew I couldn't stay if the leadership didn't have the courage to step up to do. We'd actually been put on notice by the Accrediting Association that if we didn't make some changes and invest in certain infrastructure, that they would put us on probation. It was that serious, and yet he was unwilling to move forward. Killed the whole campaign. Lack of leadership involvement kills any campaign. So, here's what I want to do, just do a quick summary. Build strong relationships before you launch. This is all about the silent phase. You got to build a strong relationship. Anchor everything in clear, purpose-driven message. It's all about the vision, not about you. Invite those whose hearts are truly aligned. And that, again, is part of that cultivation, is really understand whose hearts are aligned with what the vision is that the organization and leadership has. Communicate directly with confidence and clarity. And this goes back to that whole issue of conviction on the part of leadership. And finally, lead from the front. Vision starts with you. So I want to take just 2 minutes here because my time's up. But I want you to take like 30 to 60 seconds and just write down, of all of what we talked about for your particular situation, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you want to make sure you walk away with and apply? All righty. Yours, David.
Thanks, Rick. A round of applause, thanks. Thank you.